The question landed with the quiet, suffocating weight of a verdict. Congresswoman Omar, you've built a career on speaking for the voiceless, the struggling families, the forgotten communities, the victims of corrupt systems. JD Vance's voice carried across the hearing room, measured and controlled. It was that specific tone, the Marine prosecutor quality, that made guilty people start sweating before they even knew why. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't posturing for the cameras. He was simply stating a premise that everyone knew was about to be dismantled. So, I have one simple question, Vance said, leaning forward just slightly. When exactly did you decide to become everything you claim to fight against? The room, already tense, seemed to contract. It was Tuesday morning in the Rayburn House office building. Every seat was filled. The C-SPAN cameras were rolling live, their red tally lights blinking like unblinking eyes. This was the kind of hearing that makes careers, or ends them, and the air was thick with the electricity of political execution. JD Vance was sitting in the chair usually reserved for a committee chairman, using his authority as Vice President and President of the Senate to preside over a special joint inquiry. It was rare. It was historic. It was unprecedented. And for Ilhan Omar, sitting at the witness table, it was a nightmare scenario. She shifted in her chair, adjusting the microphone with a hand that wasn't quite steady. She knew what was coming. Everyone in Washington knew what was coming. The rumors had been circulating for weeks. Subpoenas issued in quiet, documents declassified, bank records unsealed. But rumors were one thing. JD Vance, sitting 10 feet away with a stack of folders, was another. We are here because there are questions, Vance continued, his eyes never leaving hers. Serious questions about money, about connections, about a billion-dollar fraud that happened in your district, among your donors, among your campaign workers. He paused, letting the number hang there. $1 billion. We have questions about where refugee programs turned into piggy banks, Vance said, where hungry kids' lunch money ended up buying somebody's third vacation home. And before you start, and I know you will, this isn't about your faith. It's not about your identity. It's not about where you were born. He picked up a heavy bound document and dropped it on the table. The thud echoed in the silence. It's about documents, Vance said. Bank records, federal indictments, 70 people, Congresswoman, 70. All connected to the same fraud. Several connected to your campaign. Omar opened her mouth to speak, her face setting into a mask of practiced indignation. She was ready to launch into her prepared statement about targeted Islamophobia, about unfair scrutiny, about the victimization of Muslim politicians. It was the shield she had used for years. Vance didn't let her raise it. So, let's start simple, he said, cutting off her breath before she could draw it. The Feeding Our Future scandal. $1 billion stolen from American taxpayers. Stolen from programs meant to feed children during a pandemic. He opened the first folder. And somehow, Congresswoman, a lot of the people getting arrested seem to know you pretty well. Want to explain that? Omar launched into her speech anyway. Mr. Vice President, this inquiry is nothing more than a partisan witch hunt designed to distract from the real issues facing my constituents. It is a targeted attack based on Islamophobic tropes, and Vance watched her, taking notes. He let her go for 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. She was building up steam, getting confident, warming to her narrative. The champagne socialist was in her element, turning an accountability hearing into a lecture on tolerance. Then, Vance held up a single sheet of paper. He didn't speak. He just held it up. Omar stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes flicked to the paper, then back to him. The silence that followed was louder than her speech. "Done?" Vance asked. He didn't wait for an answer. "Good," he said, "because I've got 70 names here. 70 people indicted in the Feeding Our Future fraud. Federal indictments, Congresswoman. Not allegations. Indictments, guilty pleas, prison sentences." He set the paper down flat on the mahogany table. "And I'm going to need you to help me understand something curious," Vance said. 7 of these people donated to your campaign. Not $1, not $5, thousands, real money. He tapped a name on the list with his index finger. Guhad Hashi Said, Vance read. Multiple witnesses describe him as a key figure in your political operation. Your campaign enforcer. He made sure people donated. He made sure they voted right. He made sure things went your way in the Somali community. Omar's hands clasped together on the table. It was the first sign of genuine tension. "And now," Vance said, looking up, "Mr. Said is indicted for stealing millions of dollars from programs meant to feed hungry children during a pandemic." Vance leaned back, his expression hardening. "But I'm sure that's just a coincidence, right?" The tone suggested he found nothing coincidental about it. The trap had been set. The identity politics defense had been dismantled before it could even be fully deployed. Now, there was nowhere to hide but the facts. And the facts were not on her side. "Let's talk about coincidences," Vance said, "because in my experience as a prosecutor, when you see this many coincidences involving this much money, it's usually a conspiracy." The word conspiracy hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Ilhan Omar's staff, seated behind her, exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't the usual congressional theater where politicians traded sound bites for cable news. This was a forensic dissection. "Here is what's interesting," Vance said, pulling a large diagram from his folder. "The money flow. Federal dollars flow into Minnesota," Vance explained, tracing the line on the chart. "The Feeding Our Future program. A noble cause. Feed kids during the pandemic when schools are closed. Hundreds of millions of dollars pouring into your district." "Except," Vance said, his voice dropping, "the kids weren't getting fed. The money wasn't buying sandwiches. It was feeding something else entirely." He looked at the audience, painting a picture. "Picture a small business owner in Minneapolis," Vance said. "He works 2 jobs. He fills out the forms. He pays his taxes every year. He sees a local charity offering to feed kids, and he thinks, good cause. He donates $50 he can't really spare. He feels good about helping." Vance turned back to Omar. "Meanwhile," he said, "across town there is the Safari restaurant. Nice place. A hub for the Somali community." He held up a photo of the restaurant. "And according to multiple witnesses," Vance said, "this is the Congresswoman's spot. This is where you hold your fundraisers. This is where your team meets. This is where the community knows to go if they want access to Ilhan Omar." He placed a second photo next to the first. It showed the same restaurant, but this time surrounded by FBI agents carrying boxes. "Same restaurant," Vance said. "Same location. But this is also where the Feeding Our Future fraud was coordinated. Same place, same people." "Some nights," Vance said, "it's a fundraiser for the Congresswoman. Other nights, it's a planning session for defrauding the federal government of $250 million. One location," Vance said. 2 purposes. Funny how that works." Omar shifted, her face tightening. "I visit many local businesses in my district. I cannot be held responsible for the private actions of every business owner I meet. Let me make sure I understand this, Vance interrupted, his voice sharp. Federal money flows to feeding our future. Millions, tens of millions, eventually over 1 billion nationwide. The program claims to feed hungry kids, but the kids aren't getting fed. The money is disappearing into luxury cars, into mansions in Kenya, into jewelry, into international travel. And, Vance added, into campaign donations. He pulled out another document, a timeline. Here is what's interesting, Vance said. The timing. 2020. The fraud ramps up. The money starts flowing. 2020. Your fundraisers at Safari Restaurant increase. 2020. The donations from individuals now indicted, people like Guhad Hashi Saeed, start hitting your campaign account. It all happens together, Vance said. Same time frame, same location, same people. Omar leaned forward, her voice rising. I had no knowledge of any fraudulent activity. These individuals were community members. I cannot vet the personal finances of every donor. But I thought you cared about the little guy. Vance cut her off. The interruption was surgical. I thought you fought for the working families in your district. Because, Congresswoman, Vance said, leaning in, these fraudsters, they were stealing from working families. They were stealing from taxpayers. They were stealing from hungry children. And they were doing it, Vance said, pointing a finger at her, while donating to your campaign, while attending your events, while using your fundraising venue as their fraud headquarters. Did Guhad Hashi Saeed work for your campaign? Vance asked abruptly. Omar hesitated. It was a fatal tell. He was a volunteer community organizer, she stammered. Did he or did he not help raise money for your campaigns? Vance pressed. Yes or no? The Somali community supported. Yes or no? The words were separated, sharp, clear. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Someone in the gallery coughed. Yes, she whispered. Thank you. Vance nodded slowly. A man who the FBI says stole millions from children's feeding programs also raised thousands for your campaigns. A man who multiple witnesses call your enforcer. A man who operated out of your fundraising venue. And you want us to believe you didn't know, Vance said, shaking his head. You didn't ask questions. You didn't wonder where all this sudden money was coming from. You didn't notice that your fundraising hub was also fraud central. Refugee to riches, Vance said quietly. Funny how that works. You come to America with nothing, he continued. You champion the poor. You fight for the forgotten. And somehow, you end up surrounded by people stealing from the poorest kids in your district. People who also happen to be filling your campaign coffers. Omar's face was pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She was drowning in the connections she claimed didn't exist. But wait, Vance said, reaching for a thick folder. There's more. Because after the arrests started, Vance said, after the headlines hit, you made a statement. You said you were one of the first members of Congress to call for investigations into feeding our future. He opened the folder. Here is your letter to the Secretary of Agriculture, Vance said. Want to know when it's dated? 3 months after the FBI raids began. 3 months after 70 people were already under investigation, Vance said. After the fraud was already national news. That isn't being first, Congresswoman. That is called covering your tracks. Gasps rippled through the room. You weren't deceived, Vance said. You benefited. Your campaign benefited. Your political operation benefited. While kids went hungry, your campaign account grew. That isn't being deceived. That is being complicit. He leaned forward, making direct eye contact. So, let me ask you directly, under oath. Did you or did you not receive campaign donations from individuals now indicted for stealing from programs meant to feed children? The pause was the longest yet. 15 seconds. 20. You could hear her breathing through the microphone. Fast. Shallow. Panic. Yes, she finally said. Folks watching at home, Vance said to the camera. She just admitted it under oath. The room heard it. The cameras caught it. That is a confession of connection. And we are just getting started. The admission of receiving tainted donations hung in the room like smog. Ilhan Omar looked diminished, her hands gripping the edge of the witness table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The identity politics shield lay shattered on the floor, useless against the cold, hard receipts of federal indictments. But JD Vance wasn't done. He was just switching targets. That was round one, Vance said, stacking the fraud documents neatly to the side. 7 donors, 1 enforcer, $1 billion stolen. And somehow, she knew nothing. He looked at the camera. Share this. Comment. Ask the question. What did she know, and when did she know it? Vance turned back to Omar, his demeanor shifting. The sharp edge of the prosecutor softened into something deceptively conversational. The calm before a much more personal storm. Let's talk about love, Vance said. The word sounded out of place in a congressional hearing. Omar blinked, confused. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently, his eyes darting around the room. Beautiful thing, love, Vance mused. Unexpected, spontaneous, romantic. He paused, his eyes narrowing. Or, in your case, Congresswoman, incredibly well-funded. He pulled out a new folder. It was labeled E Street Group. 2018, Vance said. You hire a consulting firm called the E Street Group. Professional relationship. Business. Standard stuff. The firm is run by a man named Tim Minette. He opened the folder slowly, letting the anticipation build. Then, somewhere along the way, and I'm just reading from your own interviews here, you fell in love. Happens to people. Chemistry, connection. Hearts don't follow schedules. He looked up, locking eyes with her. Except, Vance said, here is what's interesting. Between falling in love and marrying him, your campaign paid his firm $2.78 million. He let the number hang there. 2.78 million with an M. Omar's knuckles whitened as she gripped the table. Now, I'm just a guy from Ohio, Vance said, his folksy delivery twisting the knife. Marine background, traditional values, simple man. But where I come from, when you start dating someone, usually the courting involves flowers, maybe dinner, a movie. You went with millions in campaign funds. Romantic, Vance said dryly. Expensive. And according to your lawyers, completely legal. He paused. Let's examine that claim. Vance pulled out a document stamped with the seal of the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board. Here is what's interesting, Vance said. The state officials, not partisan hacks, just bureaucrats doing their jobs, looked into this. And you know what? They found violations, plural, not allegations, findings. The board ruled that your campaign improperly used funds, Vance read. They ordered you to reimburse $3,500. They fined you a $500 civil penalty for violating state campaign finance law. But that's just the state level, Vance said, dismissing it with a wave. Small potatoes. Let's talk about the real money. Federal campaign funds. FEC jurisdiction. He laid out a timeline graphic. "Let me make sure I understand this," Vance said. "Month 1, you hire E Street Group, $60,000 for consulting. Reasonable rate, standard stuff. Month 3, payments increase. Month 6, payments double. Nothing unusual happening in your life, right? Just business. Month 8, Tim Minot tells his wife he is leaving her. For you. For the Congresswoman." Vance looked at the document. According to divorce filings, his wife's sworn testimony, he told her he was romantically involved with Representative Omar. "But I thought you cared about the little guy," Vance said, bringing back his recurring hook. It landed harder this time. "The small donor in Minneapolis who scraped together $25 for your campaign. The college kid who donated $10 instead of buying lunch. The working mom who gave $50 from her grocery money because she believed in you. Believed you would fight corruption." He held up a printout of a campaign finance report. "That $25, that $10, that $50. Part of it went to your boyfriend," Vance said, "for consulting. Consulting that included, according to court documents, travel expenses." "Travel where?" Vance asked. "With whom? Doing what? Exactly?" Omar's voice rose, cracking with defensiveness. "The FEC cleared me of—" "Stop." Vance held up a hand. "The FEC didn't clear you. The FEC was deadlocked. 4 commissioners are needed for action. They only had 3. That isn't exoneration. That is an inability to prosecute. Big difference." "Here is the real story," Vance said. "The human story." "Picture the small donor," Vance said. "He works 2 jobs. He sees you on TV, fighting for the people, fighting the system. He thinks, finally, someone who gets it. He donates $25. He can't really afford it, but he does it anyway. Because belief matters. That $25 gets pooled with thousands of others," Vance continued. "It goes into your campaign account. And where does it go from there?" "To Tim Minot's firm," Vance answered. "For consulting, for travel, for digital advertising that any intern could do, for fundraising that actually decreased during this period." $2.78 million, Vance repeated. "For what? Generic mail pieces? Basic Facebook ads? The kind of work that normally costs maybe $200,000? Maybe $300,000 if you're fancy? But you paid $2.78 million to your boyfriend, then husband, for work worth a fraction of that." "Just a simple question," Vance said. "How much did you pay E Street before you started dating Mr. Minot?" "I don't recall the exact—" $60,000, Vance answered, "for professional services." "How much after you started dating him?" "Our relationship had nothing to do with the campaign." $2.78 million, Vance said. "That is quite a raise. That is a 4,000% increase for falling in love. Did your campaign contributors know their money was funding your romance?" Silence. Longer than before. Heavier. The kind of silence that answers questions without words. "No answer?" Vance asked softly. "Of course not." "Because you know what that sounds like," Vance said. "You know what it looks like. You know what it is. It is using donor money for personal benefit. It is converting campaign funds for private use. It is exactly what the law prohibits." "Refugee to riches," Vance said. "Funny how that works." "You came to America with nothing," he said. "You built a political career on fighting corruption. And the moment you got power, you used it to enrich your husband with donor money. The moment you got access to campaign accounts, you turned them into a personal piggy bank." Omar's head was down now, her shoulders hunched. The champagne socialist label hung over her like a shroud. "That's round 2, Vance said. 2.8 million reasons to question her integrity. But wait, he said, reaching for the next folder. There's more. Because while she was paying her husband millions, he was busy with side projects, using other people's money, and families lost everything. JD Vance opened the third folder. This one wasn't about campaign finance law. It wasn't about federal regulations. It was about something simpler and uglier: greed. While your campaign was making Tim Minot very wealthy, Vance said, his voice tightening, he was busy with entrepreneurship, the American dream, starting businesses, taking risks. Omar looked up, wary. She sensed the shift. This wasn't about her political operation anymore. It was about her family's character. He and his business partner, Will Haler, started some ventures, Vance explained. A winery in Rhode Island called E-Set Crew. Fancy name, French-sounding, very sophisticated. They also started a marijuana business in South Dakota. Cannabis ventures, very on-trend, very progressive. Vance's tone dripped with irony. Ambitious projects, he said. They required investment, and investors stepped up. They believed in the vision. They believed in the businessmen from Washington, D.C., with connections and expertise. They put their money in. He opened the folder to reveal a stack of legal filings. Except, Vance said, there is a problem. Well, several problems. Multiple lawsuits, Vance listed, fraud allegations, missing money, and investors who put in their life savings somehow ended up with nothing. He let that sink in. But I'm sure you knew nothing about that either, Vance said dryly. Here is what's interesting, Vance continued. Court documents, the discovery phase of the lawsuits, financial records subpoenaed, business accounts examined. Want to know what investigators found? One account had 5 cents, Vance said. He let the number hang. Not 5,000, not 500, 5 cents. Another account had 42.44. This is from businesses that took in millions from investors. Omar's hands were shaking visibly now. Now, I'm just a Marine, Vance said. Basic math skills. But when millions go in and pennies come out, something is wrong with that equation. Either catastrophically terrible business skills, which raises the question of why your campaign paid him millions to consult on your political business, or fraud, which raises different questions. Let me make sure I understand this, Vance said. Your husband took money from investors, working families in Rhode Island, small business owners, people who had saved for years, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, life savings for some of them. They invested in his winery, Vance said. They believed in local business. They believed in the American dream. And what happened to their money? Gone, Vance snapped his fingers. Vanished. Lawsuits filed. Court dates scheduled. Discovery revealing empty bank accounts. Attorneys telling shocked investors, sorry, the money is gone. Nothing to recover. But I thought you cared about the little guy, Vance said. The hook landed again, brutal and repetitive. About working families. About people trying to build something. Because, Congresswoman, Vance said, your husband's fraud victims, they are working families. They are people who believed in something, who took a risk, who lost everything. Picture them, Vance said. Real people, not statistics. A couple in Rhode Island who saved for 10 years, $40,000. They wanted to invest in a local business, support their community. They trusted 2 businessmen from D.C., professional men, connected men. One of them married to a congresswoman, for God's sake. Seemed legitimate. They signed the papers, Vance said. They transferred the money. They waited for returns. They got lawsuits instead. They got court dates. They got discovery showing empty bank accounts. They got nothing. Here is the timeline again, Vance said, because timing matters. Your husband starts these ventures while consulting for your campaign, takes millions from investors, takes millions from your campaign. Both ventures failing, both investors suing. Campaign money keeps flowing to him. Investor money vanishing. But you and he, Vance asked, you're doing fine. Nice homes, nice lifestyle, nice everything. Just a simple question, Vance said. Did you know your husband was being sued by investors for fraud? Tim's business dealings were completely separate from did you know. Each word was sharp, precise, leaving no room for escape. I may have been aware there were some difficulties. Some difficulties, Vance repeated, his laugh cold and harsh. That is what we are calling fraud now? When investors lose their retirement savings? When families lose their kids' college funds? When life savings disappear into empty bank accounts? Those are difficulties? Omar looked down, unable to maintain eye contact. Defeat was written in the curve of her spine. These people lost everything to your husband, Vance said, while your campaign made him a millionaire, paid him $2.78 million for consulting, for travel, for services rendered. He didn't need their money to survive, Vance said. Your campaign was funding his lifestyle. He took their money anyway because he could, because nobody was watching, because his wife. Vance paused. You certainly weren't stopping him. The room was silent, absolutely silent. Everyone was processing the implications. Here is what I think happened, Vance said, his voice quieter now, steady, devastating. I think your husband realized he could take money from anyone. Investors? Sure. Campaign donors? Why not? Nobody was asking questions. Nobody was checking. You certainly weren't stopping him. Maybe you didn't ask, Vance allowed. Maybe you didn't want to know. But you knew something. Had to know something. You are married to the man, sharing a life, sharing accounts. And you are telling me you had no idea he was being sued? No idea families were losing their savings? No idea his business accounts were empty? He leaned forward. I don't believe you, Vance said. And neither does anyone else in this room. Refugee to riches, Vance said. You know this phrase by now. And your husband. Consultant to con artist. Similar trajectory. Same story. Different details. Omar grabbed a glass of water with a shaking hand. She didn't drink. She just held it, needing something to hold on to. Within hours, investor groups were mobilizing. New motions were being filed. Add Ilhan Omar as defendant, benefited from proceeds of fraud. Her name was on new lawsuits. Her lawyers were scrambling. Progressive media outlets went silent. Usually, her defenders. Usually, her allies. Not this time. You can't defend defrauding working families. You can't spin investors losing life savings. Just silence. Deafening silence. The squad, silent. Not one tweet of support. Not one defense. Abandoned. Isolated. Alone. Think Progress removed articles defending her. Daily Cosmods deleted threads. Even her progressive base wavered on Reddit. This looks really bad. Can't defend this. She's done. Upvotes in the thousands. Her coalition was cracking. Her next scheduled campaign event had 20 people show up. Used to be hundreds. Half were protesters with signs. Where's our money? Investigate Omar. Fraud squad. She canceled. Didn't even try. Just left through the back. That's 3, Vance said, his voice cutting through the chaos of her collapse. Million-dollar campaign payments while husband defrauds investors. Money flowing in. Money vanishing. Families destroyed. But that's just money, Vance said. Round 4 is about something else. Something that hurt people differently. A different kind of betrayal. Remember September 11th? Vance asked. She barely does. Let's talk about some people did something. We'll be right back. JD Vance's tone shifted. The forensic sharpness of the financial inquiries dissolved, replaced by something harder, deeper, and infinitely more personal. He stood behind the podium, his posture rigid, the Marine coming to the surface. I was 17 when the towers fell, Vance said. His voice was quieter now, controlled, but the emotion underneath was vibrating like a plucked wire. I was a senior in high school in Ohio, small town, safe place. I watched it on a television in social studies class. I watched people jump. I watched the towers collapse. I watched my country change forever. The room went silent. It was a different kind of silence than before, respectful, heavy, laden with collective memory. A year later, Vance continued, I joined the Marines. I deployed to Iraq. I did that because of 9/11, because 19 terrorists murdered 2,977 Americans. He let each word land like a stone. Murdered them, burned them, crushed them, made them jump from burning buildings because burning to death was worse than falling. Ilhan Omar sat very still. Her face was pale. She knew exactly where this was going. 19 terrorists, Vance said. Not some people. 19 Islamic terrorists, members of Al-Qaeda. Names known, faces documented, stories told. Not did something, murdered, planned, executed. The worst terrorist attack in American history. He pulled out a transcript. But you, Congresswoman, Vance said, speaking at a KR fundraiser, described it as... He read from the page, his voice flat with disbelief. Some people did something. 5 words. Vance let them hang there in the hearing room, stripping them of any context or spin. Those are your words, Congresswoman. Some people did something. That is how you describe the mass murder of nearly 3,000 of your fellow citizens. If you look at the full context, Omar started, her voice defensive. I read your full speech, Vance cut her off. I watched the video. 20 minutes. I have it right here. He tapped the transcript. You weren't taken out of context. You trivialized the worst terrorist attack in American history. And I want to know why. He walked around the table, closing the distance. Let's break this down. Some people. Not terrorists. Not Al-Qaeda. Not 19 murderers. Some people. Like describing Pearl Harbor as some folks showed up uninvited. Like describing the Holocaust as some things happened. And then the kicker, Vance said, reading again. All of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. That is the focus for you, isn't it? Vance asked. Not the dead, not the families, not the heroes, civil liberties. Muslims as the primary victims of 9/11. Vance's voice rose, the intensity building. Let me be clear about this. Muslim Americans did face increased scrutiny after 9/11. That happened. Some of it was unjustified. Some of it was racist. That is worth discussing. But, Congresswoman, Vance said, pointing a finger at her, that is not what you did. You didn't discuss both the attack and the response. You minimized the attack to center the response. You made your community the primary victims of a day when 2,977 people were murdered. He pulled out another document. It was a photo of a man named Nicholas Harros, Jr., wearing a black T-shirt with Omar's words printed on it. Nicholas Harros, Jr., Vance said. son of Frances Harrows. She died in the World Trade Center on September 11th. He stood at ground zero on the anniversary and wore this shirt. And he said this to you. Vance read the testimony. Today, I am here to respond to you exactly who did what to whom. Madam, we know who and what was done. 19 Islamic terrorists, members of Al-Qaeda, killed over 3,000 people and caused billions of dollars in damage. Is that clear? Vance lowered the paper. And your response to this grieving son? Vance asked. To the families of the murdered? You made it about Islamophobia. You made yourself the victim. Again. A pattern, Vance noted. Always the victim. Never the one who did wrong. But I thought you cared about victims, Vance said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. About the oppressed. About the vulnerable. Because the families of 9/11 victims, they are all those things. They were vulnerable on September 11th. They are still hurting now, still grieving, still missing mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, children. And you gave them. Some people did something. Just a simple question. Can you name the 19 terrorists who carried out the attacks? Vance asked abruptly. Omar hesitated. I don't know all of them off the top of my... Can you name one? Vance pressed. Just name one terrorist. Silence. Long. Devastating. I am sure I could look it up. You can't name one. Vance's voice carried genuine disbelief. You remember to center Muslim victimhood. You remember Cair's founding. You remember civil liberties. But you can't name one terrorist who murdered 3,000 Americans. Can't name one victim either, I'd bet. Can you name one victim of 9/11 without looking it up? Silence. Total silence. She had nothing. No answer. No excuse. No deflection that would work in this room. You came to America as a refugee, Vance said, his tone softening into something almost gentle, which made it worse. Fleeing violence, fleeing terror, Somalia's civil war. You know what it means to lose everything to violence, to fear for your life, to see death, to experience trauma. He paused, letting that reality sink in. And then you trivialized the worst terrorist attack on the country that took you in. The country that gave you safety, that gave you shelter, that gave you opportunity, that educated you, that made you a Congresswoman. 2,077 people didn't get that opportunity, Vance said. They got death. Their families got grief. First responders got cancer from the toxic dust. And you gave them dismissive rhetoric. Omar's head was down, her body hunched. Tears were visible on her face now, but there was no sympathy in the room. Hard faces, cold eyes. Justice, not sympathy. You know what the cruelest part is? Vance asked, gathering his papers. You think you are the victim here. You think being criticized for minimizing mass murder makes you oppressed. You think being held accountable for disrespecting 9/11 families makes you persecuted. That is the problem, Vance said. That has always been the problem. You can't see past your own victimhood long enough to recognize actual victims. Outside the room, the reaction was instantaneous. 9/11 family groups issued joint statements demanding her resignation. First responder unions piled on. Never forget means never forgive this. Veterans groups joined in. The isolation was complete. That's four, Vance said, his voice cutting through the tension. Some people did something. 2,877 Americans murdered. And she couldn't name one terrorist, couldn't name one victim. But she can name her own victimhood in detail. He paused. Final pause before the final round. Round 5 is about money again, Vance said. Because refugee to millionaire, That is quite a journey on a public servant's salary, especially while preaching socialism. Let's trace that journey. Let's do the math. Let's see if it adds up. Spoiler alert? It doesn't. JD Vance settled back into his chair. He looked almost conversational again, the calm prosecutor preparing to deliver the closing argument of a lifetime. The room was exhausted, the air thick with the revelations of the past hour, but Vance wasn't done. He had one more layer to peel back. "Let's talk about socialism," Vance said. Ilhan Omar straightened slightly. This was her territory. This was her message, her brand. "You love talking about it," Vance continued. "Wealth inequality, the 1%, tax the rich, make them pay their fair share, Medicare for all, free college, the Green New Deal, the whole progressive playbook." "And you are passionate about it," Vance admitted. "I'll give you that. Very passionate, very articulate, very convincing when you talk about other people's money." Vance's pause was deliberate. "Other people's money," he repeated. "That is the key phrase there." He pulled out a new stack of financial documents. "But here is what's interesting, what fascinates me, what doesn't add up no matter how many times I check the math." "Let me make sure I understand your story," Vance said. "You arrived in America as a refugee. You've told this story many times. Beautiful story, moving story. Fled Somalia, refugee camp in Kenya, arrived in America with nothing, literally nothing." "I believe you," Vance said. "That is a hard journey, tremendous hardship, real poverty. Respect to you for surviving that." He spread the documents out on the table. "So, let's do the math." "Public service career," Vance listed. "Minnesota State Legislature, $41,000 a year. Congress, $174,000 a year. Good money," Vance noted. "Not poverty, but also not become a millionaire money." Omar's hands returned to the table, gripping the edge. She knew where this was going. "You have been in public service for a total of about 8 years, Vance calculated. State legislature, Congress. Let's be generous with the numbers. Let's say you made total, before taxes, about $1.5 million. Before taxes, Vance emphasized. After taxes? After living in D.C., one of the most expensive cities in America? After maintaining a residence in your district? After travel? After everything?" He did the mental math out loud. "Maybe you cleared $1 million if you were incredibly frugal. If you lived like a monk, which you didn't. But let's say you did. Let's say you saved half of it. Very generous assumption. That is $500,000. Vance looked up, making direct eye contact. "So, explain to me how you are worth several $1,000,000. "Multiple millions," Vance clarified. "Properties, assets, lifestyle, nice homes, nice cars, nice everything, public records, financial disclosures." "They paint a picture," Vance said. "Refugee to multimillionaire. In 8 years of public service, while preaching socialism, while attacking the wealthy, while demanding redistribution." "Just a simple question," Vance said. "But first, context." "Your progressive friends have the same story," Vance noted. "Bernie Sanders, socialist for decades, 3 houses, multimillionaire. I wrote a book," he says. "Okay, Bernie, so capitalism worked for you." Elizabeth Warren, champion of the middle class, net worth in the millions. AOC, showed up to Congress complaining about student loans, now living in a luxury D.C. apartment. Met gala dress that cost more than most Americans make in a month. Marked tax the rich while partying with billionaires. "That isn't activism," Vance said. "That is performance art." He turned back to Omar. "And you fit right in," Vance said. "The champagne socialist, The pattern: preach equality, practice luxury, attack the rich, become the rich. Here is what's interesting about this hypocrisy, Vance continued. You preach socialism, government control of resources, redistribution of wealth, tax the wealthy into oblivion. No billionaires should exist. That is your message, and your base. They love it. Working families in Minneapolis, struggling college students, people working 2 jobs to make rent. They hear you and think, finally, someone who gets it, someone who understands our struggle. But let me make sure I understand this. You fled poverty, experienced real hardship, got to America, got into politics, started telling struggling Americans that rich people are the problem, that wealth inequality is destroying the country, that nobody should be a millionaire? Pause. Long pause. And while giving those speeches, you became a millionaire. Multiple times over. Omar's breathing was rapid now, her face flushed. No good answer available, no deflection that would work. But I thought you cared about the little guy, Vance said, about wealth inequality. The hook landed one final time. Because, Congresswoman, you are the wealth inequality. You are the 1%er in your own district now. The family in Minneapolis who donated $25 to your campaign, they are still in the same house, same job, same struggle. You, Vance asked, you are in a different tax bracket, different world, different life. Picture them, Vance said. Real people. The college kid who phone banked for your campaign, knocked on doors, made calls, believed in your message, still drowning in student debt, can't afford rent, working 3 part-time jobs. Meanwhile, your family is doing fine, real fine. The math doesn't work, Vance said, shaking his head. Public service salary plus speaking fees plus book deals equals comfortable life, not multi-million-dollar wealth, not mysterious asset accumulation, not a rapid climb to the 1%. Something else generated that wealth, Vance said, and you won't explain what. Your financial disclosures are vague, income sources unclear, property acquisition timeline suspicious. The whole picture is muddy. Just a simple question, Vance said. Final question. What is your current net worth? I don't have an exact figure. Ballpark, Omar mumbled. Million? 2 million? 5? My financial disclosures show. Yes or no? Are you a millionaire? Longest pause of the entire hearing. 15 seconds. 20. 25. The room held its breath. Everyone knew the answer. They were just waiting for her to admit it. Finally, quietly, barely audible. Yes. Yes, Vance repeated. She is a millionaire. The socialist is a millionaire. The refugee who arrived with nothing is now in the 1%. The woman who tells working families to embrace economic equality has economically separated herself from them. Funny how that works. He gathered his papers. Final time. And you got there working for the government, Vance said, representing working families, preaching socialism. You got there taking campaign donations from fraud perpetrators, paying your husband millions while his investors lost everything, while families struggled, while kids went hungry. You got there by betraying everything you claim to believe in. Refugee to riches, Vance said. That is the whole story. That is the arc. You came with nothing. Fair enough. America gave you opportunity. Fantastic. You went into public service. Noble. And somehow, Vance said, his voice rising with passion, you figured out how to get very wealthy while telling everyone else they shouldn't be allowed to. That isn't socialism, Vance declared. That is a scam. That is telling working families to give up their dreams while you chase yours. That is telling college kids they can't succeed in capitalism while you prove they can. Just not them. Just you. Just your family. Just your friends. Just the connected insiders. Omar's head was down, shoulders shaking. She was crying openly now, but the room was unmoved. The champagne socialist, Vance said. That is what they call people like you. Preach equality. Practice luxury. Attack the rich. Become the rich. It is the oldest con in politics, Vance said, and you are running it on the people who believed in you most. JD Vance stood up from behind the committee table. He gathered the neat stacks of evidence, the fraud indictments, the campaign finance records, the investor lawsuits, the 9/11 transcript, the net worth calculations, and held them in one hand. It was a physical representation of the weight he had just placed on Ilhan Omar's shoulders. Working families in Minneapolis donated their hard-earned money to your campaigns, Vance said, his voice echoing in the silent room. $25, $50, $100. Money they needed. Money they sacrificed because they believed you would fight for them. Fight for justice. Fight for equality. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back for a final statement. Instead, Vance said, you fought for you. Your husband, your lifestyle, your wealth, their money, your pocket, their sacrifice, your benefit, their struggle, your comfort. That is the truth, Vance said. That is the record. That is who you are. He walked out. The clicking of the door closing behind him was the only sound in the room. The fallout was instantaneous. The Democratic Socialists of America moved fast. An emergency meeting was called within the hour. The vote was unanimous. A statement was released before the sun set. We are removing our endorsement of Representative Omar. Her actions are inconsistent with our values and our mission. Translation: she is a fraud, and everyone knows it. Her district offices in Minneapolis were flooded. But it wasn't Republicans calling. It was her own voters. Angry constituents. Where is our justice? Where is our redistribution? Where is our equality? Protesters gathered outside her main office. They carried signs that cut deep. Investigate Omar. Millionaire socialist is an oxymoron. The base was abandoning ship. The Republican ads were writing themselves. The screen would split into three. Her face, Bernie's face, AOC's face. Meet the millionaire socialists who want your money. They got rich. You stayed poor. They want more. It was devastatingly effective because it was true. Polling numbers cratered. Her favorable ratings collapsed, even in deep blue Minneapolis, even among progressives, even among Democratic primary voters. Because socialists can forgive many things, policy failures, bad votes, gaffes, but they cannot forgive hypocrisy. They cannot forgive getting rich while preaching poverty. They cannot forgive betraying the core message while profiting from it. Working families across America were watching. They were learning. They were understanding. It was always about her, never about them. The politician in expensive clothes telling them to sacrifice, while sacrificing nothing, taking everything, giving nothing back. That's 5, Vance said to the cameras waiting in the hallway. Fraud connections, campaign finance violations, husband's enrichment, investor fraud, 9/11 minimization, millionaire socialist. 5 rounds, 5 scandals. 1 pattern, 1 conclusion. He paused, looking directly into the lens. Let's talk about what it means. JD Vance stood at a podium in the hallway, surrounded by reporters. The hearing room doors were closed behind him, but the story had already escaped. So, here we are, Vance said. 5 scandals, 5 rounds, one inescapable pattern. Ilhan Omar is not an aberration, Vance declared. She is not one bad apple. She is not even particularly unique. She is the perfectly ordinary product of a corrupt system that rewards narcissism and punishes honesty. Let's review what we have learned. He held up a finger. The fraud connection. $1 billion stolen from programs meant to feed hungry children during a pandemic. Her district, her fundraising venue, her donors, her campaign enforcer, all connected to the largest pandemic fraud in American history. Her response? I didn't know. Right? You didn't know your own campaign worker was stealing from starving kids? Didn't know your fundraising hub was fraud headquarters? Didn't wonder where all this sudden money was coming from? Sure. He held up a second finger. The family enrichment scheme. $2.78 million to her husband's consulting firm. While dating him. While marrying him. After the relationship started, payments skyrocketed. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board found she violated state law, ordered her to pay back money, fined her for improper use of campaign funds. Her excuse? The FEC cleared me. No, the FEC was gridlocked. That isn't exoneration. That is inability to prosecute. Very different thing. Third finger. The business failures and investor fraud. Her husband defrauding investors. Multiple lawsuits. Missing millions. Court discovery showing empty bank accounts. Families losing life savings. While her campaign made him a millionaire. Her defense? I wasn't involved in his businesses. You just married him, paid him millions, shared accounts, shared a life, but knew nothing? Convenient. Fourth finger. The 9/11 minimization. 2,977 Americans murdered. Families devastated. Nations scarred. Her description? Some people did something. Can't name one terrorist. Can't name one victim. But can recite every perceived slight against herself in detail. When grieving families objected, she made herself the victim. Fifth finger. The socialist scam. Refugee to multimillionaire on a public servant's salary. While preaching equality. While attacking the wealthy. While telling working families to embrace economic justice. The math doesn't work, Vance said. The story doesn't add up. The wealth came from somewhere. She won't say where. Won't explain how. Just keeps preaching socialism while practicing capitalism for herself. Not for you. He lowered his hand. This isn't complicated, Vance said. This is betrayal. Pure, simple, complete. She came to America with nothing. True story. America gave her opportunity, safety, education, a platform, all true. She went into politics claiming to fight for the powerless. That is what she said. But at every turn, Vance said, every decision, every choice, she fought for herself. Campaign donors thought they were funding a movement. They funded her marriage. Investors in her husband's ventures thought they were building businesses. They funded fraud. Somali community members thought they had an advocate in Washington. They had someone whose fundraising hub was also fraud central. 9/11 families thought every congressperson respected their pain. Wrong. Working families thought she would fight inequality. She became the inequality. But here is the thing about Omar, Vance said. The revealing thing. The damning thing. She isn't sorry. Watch her responses, Vance urged. Study her pattern. Never real accountability. Always deflection. Always victimhood. Always someone else's fault. Islamophobia, racism, misunderstanding, out of context, taken the wrong way, unfair targeting, media bias, Republican attacks. The list goes on, Vance said. Every excuse except the truth. Never I was wrong. Never I should have known. Never I will make it right. Never actual accountability. Because people like Omar don't make things right, Vance said. They make excuses. They make accusations. They make you the bad guy for asking questions. That is the pattern. That is who she is. And that, Vance concluded, is what makes her so dangerous. Not the individual scandals. Americans can forgive mistakes, can forgive errors in judgment, can forgive human weakness. What they can't forgive, won't forgive, shouldn't forgive, is a complete inability to accept responsibility, a total commitment to self-serving narratives, an absolute conviction that she is always the victim, never the villain. Vance gathered his breath. But Omar isn't the disease, he said. She is a symptom. Let's talk about the Democratic Party, because here is the thing. She isn't alone. JD Vance leaned against the podium in the hallway. The heavy wooden doors of the hearing room closed behind him. The press corps was silent, recording every word, sensing that the Vice President was shifting gears. He wasn't just talking about one Congresswoman anymore. He was talking about the machine that built her. But Ilhan Omar isn't the disease, Vance said, his voice echoing slightly in the marble corridor. She is a symptom. Let's talk about the Democratic Party, because here is the thing. She isn't alone. She isn't even unusual. She is typical. She is exactly what modern Democrats produce. She is what the system creates. She is the inevitable result of one-party progressive control. The squad, Vance said, shaking his head. Her little club. 4 women, all progressive, all vocal, all woke, and all, somehow, getting very comfortable, very fast. AOC, Vance listed, shows up to Congress. A bartender with student loans, relatable, real. Within months, luxury DC apartment, designer clothes, Met Gala attendance, a dress marked Tax the Rich, while she parties with billionaires and celebrities. That isn't activism. That is cosplay. Expensive cosplay. Bernie Sanders, Vance continued, the socialist crusader, decades fighting capitalism, fighting the wealthy, fighting inequality. Result? 3 houses, multi-millionaire status. I wrote a book, he says. It sold well. Okay, Bernie, so capitalism worked for you? So free market success is good? No, that is different. Different when it is you. Different when you are the one getting rich. The same system you attack created your wealth. But that is different. Elizabeth Warren, Vance said, champion of the middle class, fighter for working families, voice of the struggling, net worth in the millions, living in a Cambridge mansion, teaching one class for $400,000. But I am fighting for you, she says, from her mansion, with her wealth, while telling others they have too much. This is the pattern, Vance said. This is what Democrats do. Run on helping the poor. End up joining the rich. But they never stop lecturing you about your privilege. Never stop demanding you sacrifice. Never stop telling you that you have too much. While they accumulate, while they enrich, while they elevate themselves above the people they claim to represent. Omar fits perfectly, Vance declared. She is not an outlier. She is the prototype. Preach equality. Practice luxury. Attack the wealthy. Become wealthy. Blame everyone else for the gap. It is the Democratic playbook. It is the progressive pattern. It is how the system works. And here is why it keeps working, Vance said, leaning into the microphones. Voters keep believing them. Working families keep donating. College kids keep volunteering. Small donors keep contributing. Because the messaging is beautiful. The rhetoric is moving. The promises are attractive. We are fighting for you. We understand your struggle. We will make the rich pay. We will create equality. We will fix the system. People want to believe it, Vance said softly. Need to believe it. Desperate to believe someone in power actually cares about them. But look at the results, Vance urged. Not the speeches, the results, not the promises, the outcomes, not the rhetoric, the reality. Who gets rich in democratic politics? Vance asked. The politicians, the consultants, the staff, the family members, the spouses, the children, the connected insiders, the inner circle. They all do fine, really fine. Millionaires, multimillionaires, some even billionaires, all while preaching equality. Who stays poor? Vance asked. The voters, the donors, the believers, the communities they claim to represent. Minneapolis, Vance pointed out. More poverty now than when Omar was elected. More crime, more struggling families, more businesses failing, more people hurting. But Omar? Doing great. Her husband? Millionaire? Her political network? Well-connected and well-funded? Her district? Still waiting for that hope and change? This is what one-party control looks like, Vance said. Minnesota. Deep blue. Democratic control for decades. Result? Poverty, crime, decline. California? Bluest of blue. Democratic supermajority. Result? Homeless crisis. Crime surge. Middle class fleeing. New York. Same story. Illinois. Same pattern. All Democratic strongholds, Vance said. All struggling with poverty, crime, homelessness, decline. All voting for the same politicians who promise to fix it. All somehow surprised when it gets worse. Omar is not an accident of this system, Vance said. She is not a bug. She is a feature. She is inevitable. When you build a political culture that rewards grievance, you get professional grievance mongers. When you create a system that punishes accountability, you get politicians who refuse accountability. When you let politicians enrich themselves while claiming to fight inequality, you normalize the hypocrisy. You make it standard. You make it acceptable. The Democratic Party doesn't have an Omar problem, Vance said. Omar is their perfection. She is exactly what they wanted. Identity politics plus progressive rhetoric plus zero accountability equals Omar. Victimhood narrative plus wealth accumulation plus moral lecturing equals the modern Democrat. She is not the exception. She is the rule, and the party protects her. Always has. Always will. She should have been investigated in round one, Vance listed. When her fundraising hub turned out to be fraud headquarters. When her campaign worker was indicted. When the connections became obvious. Didn't happen. Democratic Party leadership looked the other way. Protected her. Shielded her. She should have been censured in round two, Vance continued. When state officials found she violated campaign finance law, when the board ordered her to pay money back, when they fined her for improper use of donor funds. Didn't happen. House leadership ignored it, minimized it, moved on. She should have been primaried in round three, Vance said, when her husband's fraud victims came forward, when the lawsuits revealed missing millions, when families told their stories of loss. Didn't happen. Party cleared the field for her, protected the incumbent, ensured her re-election. She should have resigned in round four, Vance said, when she trivialized 9/11, when she disrespected grieving families, when she couldn't name a single victim or terrorist. Didn't happen. Democrats defended her, called criticism Islamophobic, made her the victim. She should have been investigated in round five, Vance finished. when her unexplained wealth raised obvious questions, when the math didn't add up, when refugee to millionaire in 8 years demanded explanation. Didn't happen. Media called it a distraction. Party said it was private. Shut down the questions. See the pattern? Vance asked. The system works for her, for them, not for you, not for the victims, not for the donors, not for the voters, not for America, for the politicians, for the insiders, for the protected class. That is what we are fighting, Vance said. Not just corruption, systematic protection of corruption. The machine that makes Omars possible. That makes them permanent. That makes accountability impossible. The media that covers for them, the party that shields them, the donors that fund them, knowing they are corrupt, the voters that enable them by refusing to see the truth. Omar is just one swamp creature, Vance said, looking down the long hallway. The swamp is real, and it is deep, and it protects its own, and it will fight like hell to survive. Because it is not about ideology, Vance said. It is not about helping people. It has never been about helping people. It is about power, money, control, access, influence, the game. And Omar, Vance said, she learned to play the game, learned to work the system, learned to take from the poor while claiming to champion them. But the game only works if you stay silent, Vance said. It only works if you look away. We aren't looking away anymore. JD Vance looked directly into the bank of television cameras. The red lights were glowing, beaming his image into millions of living rooms across the country. He wasn't speaking to the reporters anymore. He wasn't speaking to his colleagues. He was speaking to the American people. This is what draining the swamp means, Vance said. Not just removing corrupt politicians, removing the system that creates them, dismantling the media apparatus that defends them, breaking the party structure that protects them, exposing the donor network that funds them, educating the voters that enable them. Truth over power, Vance declared. Evidence over narrative, justice over politics, accountability over protection, results over rhetoric, actions over words. That is how you beat them, Vance said. That is how you win. That is how you save the country from the Omars of the world. Want change? Vance asked. Demand accountability from everyone, every time. No excuses, no deflections, no context, no misunderstandings, no victimhood narratives, no identity politics shields. Just facts, Vance said. Just evidence, just truth. And when politicians refuse accountability, Vance said, vote them out, primary them, replace them. Don't reward betrayal with re-election. The champagne socialists count on your ignorance, Vance warned. They count on your apathy. They count on your willingness to believe the rhetoric over examining the results. They count on you being too busy to check their records, too trusting to question their wealth, too sympathetic to their victim narratives to see them victimizing others. Don't give them that, Vance said. Be informed. Be skeptical. Be demanding. Be unforgiving of corruption. Whether it is your party or theirs, Vance said, whether it is your politician or their politician, corruption is corruption. Fraud is fraud. Hypocrisy is hypocrisy. Doesn't matter what letter is next to their name. Doesn't matter what identity they claim. Doesn't matter how compelling their victim story sounds. Evidence, facts, records, results. That is what matters. That is what we just presented, Vance said, holding up his hand one last time. Ilhan Omar betrayed everyone who believed in her, and the Democratic Party helped her do it, protected her while she did it, ensured she could keep doing it. That is the real scandal, Vance said. Not just her corruption, the system that enables it, that rewards it, that protects it, that makes it inevitable. Now you know, Vance said. Now you have seen the evidence. Now you understand the pattern. What you do with that knowledge, that is up to you. He took a step closer to the microphones. If this hearing gave you even a fraction of the clarity it should, Vance said, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, email, text message. Your uncle who still votes Democrat because his grandfather did. Your friend who thinks AOC is genuine. Your co-worker who believes Bernie cares about the working class. Everyone needs to see this, Vance said. Everyone needs to understand the pattern. Drop a comment, Vance urged. What other Democrats need the Omar treatment? Because trust me, there is a long list. Long. Elizabeth Warren, claiming Cherokee heritage to get ahead. Adam Schiff, lying about classified evidence for years. Eric Swalwell, compromised by Chinese intelligence. Maxine Waters, living in a mansion outside her district while her constituents suffer. The whole parade of hypocrites who preach sacrifice while practicing luxury. And if you are in Minnesota's 5th District, Vance said, looking intense, you know what to do next. Election. Refugee to riches only works if voters let it. Don't let it. Primary her. Replace her. Send someone who will actually fight for you instead of themselves. Someone who will live by the values they preach. Someone who won't get mysteriously wealthy on a public salary while telling you to embrace poverty. This is just the beginning, Vance promised. We are just getting started. There are dozens more like her, hundreds, all playing the same game, all running the same scam, all counting on you not paying attention. Subscribe so you don't miss what is next, Vance said. So you don't miss when we expose the next fraud, the next hypocrite, the next champagne socialist pretending to care while robbing you blind. The swamp is deep, Vance said. The corruption is real. The betrayal is systematic. But the truth, Vance said, picking up his stack of folders, the truth is a weapon. And we are armed. Vance turned from the podium. He didn't take questions. He didn't smile for the cameras. He walked down the long marble hallway, the sound of his footsteps echoing with authority. He left the press corps scrambling, the internet exploding, and the Democratic establishment reeling. He left the truth on the table. Justice is coming.